Nobody should pay for AI coding anymore. Open models won. That is the claim being made, and the price gap sitting behind it is not subtle. It is the kind of number that ends arguments. The benchmarks used to end that argument the other way around. They really do not do that anymore at all. So most of that claim is right. The trouble is, the part it gets wrong is the expensive part. 3 questions settle it. What open really costs, where the gap actually bites, and what still deserves paying for. Start with the thing nobody had 5 years ago. The best open model on the planet is just a file, and anybody who wants it can go and take it. And the license is the boring detail that changes everything. No seat, no approval, no terms that quietly move in March. Now look at the prices. This is not a modest discount for a noticeably worse model. It is a different order of magnitude for something in the same conversation. But a headline price is never the bill. Run one real task through both of them and the gap narrows, because a coding agent mostly reads. It barely writes. Multiply that by 1 working month, and it is still the difference between a rounding error and a line item somebody in finance asked about. And because the file is public, nobody owns the price. If one host gets greedy, the same weights are already running somewhere cheaper. Now the part the enthusiasm skips. Serving it yourself sounds like freedom, right up until the memory arithmetic turns up and refuses to cooperate. So self-hosting, the very best one, is a data center decision, not a weekend one. The smaller sibling is the honest answer for almost everybody. At its strongest, the case is genuinely a good one. Free to take, far cheaper to run, and impossible to withdraw. Which brings up the benchmarks and the reason this got loud this year. An open model is now sitting perfectly level with a frontier model from a major lab. The top of the board is still closed, and that gap is real. Across 500 issues, it is a lot of work left undone. But that benchmark is nearly solved, and a nearly solved test flatters everybody. Make it properly harder, and the whole field drops through the floor. The direction is the part that matters here. Every open release lands closer than the last, and a distance once measured in years is now measured in months. Worth remembering what one of those tasks is. One issue, one repository, one hidden test that goes green, not a working day. And the older a public benchmark gets, the more of it has quietly ended up in the training data. A solved test predicts nothing at all. So the benchmark half of the argument holds up fine. It is just not measuring the thing being argued about, because real work is never one question. It is the same loop 40 times over, and every single pass is another chance to go sideways. This is where 2 points of reliability stops being trivia. Chain enough steps together and a small edge turns into a completely different afternoon entirely. A lot of that loss is not even bad reasoning. It is malformed output. The model handing back something the harness cannot parse at all, and it gets worse the longer things run. A 5-minute job is fine on almost anything. A 4-hour job is where the cheap option quietly stops finishing. Then there is the repository itself, which never fits. Something always gets thrown away to make room, and nobody ever tells you what went. The pricing gets stranger once caching is involved too. The number printed on the pricing page is almost never the number that lands on the invoice. And cheap seats are usually slow seats. Half of that saving quietly evaporates while somebody sits there watching an agent think it over. The tempting answer is to just retry. 3 cheap attempts really are cheaper than 1 expensive one in tokens. Nobody ever sends a bill for the waiting. And that is a trap sitting under the whole argument. A month of the most expensive model on the market costs about 12 hours of one person's time. 90% and 99% look completely identical written down. They are 2 entirely different jobs the moment the failures are yours to find. So the price gap is completely real. It is also slightly awkwardly not the number that ends up deciding anything at all. Hey, don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this. Now, back to the video. Here is where the money still genuinely makes sense. A bug across 4 files and 2 processes with no stack trace pointing anywhere is different. Same with scale. One interface change across 300 files is not hard thinking. It is relentless consistency, and that is where misses happen. There is a rung on the ladder where the cheap option simply stops climbing. Below it, nothing to discuss. Above it, everything to discuss, which reframes the whole thing. Set against 1 hour of somebody's salary time, every model on that price list is essentially free, including the dear one. Cheapest and best value are not the same sentence. The curve bends exactly where the work stops being routine, and that bend is the whole decision. So draw the line properly. Anything high volume, anything repetitive, anything that runs 1,000 times a day belongs on the free side without any argument. And anything long, anything unfamiliar, anything impossible to reproduce belongs on the other side. And not because it is better value, because it costs a day, which means the question was never really which model at all. It was which job. And that turns out to be a far easier question to answer. So route it. Send everything to the cheap model first and escalate only what comes back wrong. Most of a working week never needs escalating at all, and the bill lands far closer to free than to full price because the expensive model only ever sees a small slice that genuinely needed it in the first place. There is a tier below that as well. A small model on the machine right in front of you handles the boring half of the day without ever touching a network. And for anyone whose code legally cannot leave the building, open weights are not the cheap option at all. They are the only option there is. So put a real month of work through it. 800 tasks, 4/5 routine, and a stubborn remainder that fights back and needs the expensive model. Same work finished and most of the money still sitting in the account. That is what the argument is actually worth once it stops being a slogan. So score the original claim honestly. Almost all of it survives the check. One word does not. And it happens to be the word doing all of the heavy lifting. 3 things have to land before that word becomes true. 2 are already moving. The third is simply time, and nobody gets to shorten that one, which is why the honest answer here is a direction rather than a date. Everything past the last measured point is a guess in a very convincing costume indeed, and that is the real result. Open weights did not win the argument outright. They made winning it cheap enough that most of the time nobody needs to have it. So pay nothing at all for the 4/5 of the work that never fights back. And then pay properly for the handful of hours that actually decide whether the week shipped. Open costs almost nothing. The gap is real and it is closing. And the hard hours are still worth real money, which is not the same thing as a subscription.